Alyce Murphy grew up in Noe Valley. She is our oldest storyteller at 100. Sadly, Alyce passed away last winter, but her spirit lives on.
Well, my mother passed away when I was a child, and my wonderful grandmother moved right in and took us. There were three of us. There was a boy and another girl, and she just enfolded us right into her family. And that's who I grew up with, was my grandmother. And she was a lot of fun. She would laugh at everything. She used to, my aunt at one time, it used to be so funny because she'd prepare all these things, I think, ahead of time. And she worked for a shoe store down on Mission Street, and they gave the kids balloons when they bought shoes.
Oh, wow.
And she'd bring them home and blow them up, and Grandma would sit on them.
So she had a good sense of humor.
Yeah. She'd wait for the kids would say, Grandma, go sit on the balloon. And she'd blow them up and sit on them, and they'd laugh like hell. Huh?
And she was a big woman.
Oh, yeah, she was a little fatty. She was a 5x5.
Wow.
She was.
We were talking about that your dad was you said he was a manager at Sutro Baths?
He went to the swimming pool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was a manager of the swimming pool out there.
And so you must have gone there when you were growing up.
We'd go, because there used to be a little restaurant right at the bottom floor of the building. And of course, we'd run out. My father would take us out for breakfast, and we'd be in that little that little bitty restaurant. No, I had a nice growing up. I really, and as I said, my grandmother was she was always funny.
So Mission Street is where you went to.
It was very active. What they would do on Saturday nights, people would always be walking down there, taking a walk down Mission Street. That was their big kick.
Mm-hmm. That neighborhood must have still been an Irish neighborhood at the time.
Huh?
It was an Irish neighborhood still.
Oh yeah.
I believe so.
There were a lot of Irish where I lived, a lot of Irish all around.
Mm-hmm.
It was very lucrative.
Do you remember any restaurants that you would go out to eat at?
Yeah, in fact, I think it was still there. There was a Spanish one right there at 19th. I think it was 19th. It was a good restaurant. There was another one, McCarthy's Bar.
Mm-hmm.
God, that was there forever. Could find my father there. They had the usual, they had the bars and the soda places and things down there. Mm-hmm. And that was their kick. The people that lived around there, you take a walk down there at night. So we had a lot to keep us busy. They had a little small store on the bottom floor, and all they saw was enchiladas. Oh, we all loved those enchiladas.
Wait, was that at Sutro Bath?
Out at the beach house, out by the beach house. It was more like, how you're going up that hill? Mm-hmm. Well, it was right at the bottom of that hill.
Would you remember you used to love to go people watching out at Playland?
Oh, yeah. We all used to love to go to Playland because you threw stuff. They had these little corner boxes, and you'd go along. It was fun things to do, and you'd throw them and knock these bowling balls like
Mm-hmm.
down. I was there when the Bay Bridge was opened. In fact, I was a toll collector on it later on.
During World War II, is that when you started working at the bridge?
At the bridge, yeah.
And you were a toll taker?
I was, huh?
You took people's...
I was a toll
You
collector.
took the money.
Yeah. And
Did you like that job?
Huh?
Did you like that?
Oh, yeah. Because there was one guy who used to come every morning, bring me a flower.
Oh.
That made me happy. And, you met all kinds of people in such a short time. It's surprising you can.
So I just have a question for you. So do you think living in San Francisco has helped you live to be 100? Do you think living in San Francisco has helped you to live to 100?
Yes.
How so?
I wouldn't be any other place. I will be truthful. It's all here for me. You know, my grocery store. He's so personal. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
He sends me birthdays and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the streetcars. I don't go anymore because of my wheelchair. And but I mean, it's all right at my hands.
Next is Randy Burns, who helped form the Gay American Indians in 1975.
My name is Randy Burns. I'm a full-blood Paiute Indian from the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe in Nevada. And I came here mainly from Nevada, from University of Nevada, Reno, 43 years ago, to go to school at San Francisco State.
Okay.
I arrived here in 43 years ago when I was young, long black hair, my BIA glasses, in the spring of 74. And I arrived here on Greyhound bus, 7th and Market, and I call it Gayhound today. Like so many other queer people came from across America to be part of the gay liberation. And I came here to go to school. Like so many other gay and lesbian Native people came to San Francisco to work, to go to school, or to play. In the 1985, when the AIDS epidemic, first case of the virus that
Roughly 10 years after your
10
Twin
years
Peaks.
after we formed Gay American Indians, the epidemic, and I was telling our membership and our board of directors at the time, we were organized. I said, it's coming our way, and I said, we got to be prepared. So we went to the existing organization. The Shanti program in San Francisco was happening, providing emotional, practical support, home health care, hospital visit, the appropriate care for those who were diagnosed with, they called it the AIDS-related complex called ARC.
I do,
Then
I remember
eventually it became, CDC came out with AIDS. But back to my friend Herbie, he was so sick, and
Herbie's from out here.
Oto Navajo. He came out here as a professional hairstylist.
Okay, but you knew him in San Francisco.
Yeah, he was a member of the club.
Okay,
And
the Gay American
89 March, and he was so sick we had to take him out to, now it's called Reagan International Airport, and we took him out there. He was so weak, but all the lesbian who were going to San Francisco who knew of Gay American Indians, so we'll take care of brother. So we called ahead and said the arrival time, and they picked him up. And at least he went there, and a week later he died. And back then, I gotta say about gay men in particular, we all became caregivers to those who were diagnosed with ARC AIDS, and they worked to the very end of their death. Always charitable, always sharing what they earned with Gay American Indians.
Next is Joy Ng, a hip-hop blogger who grew up in San Francisco.
My family immigrated here from southern China in 1981, and I was born in 1989, right after the earthquake. And so I went to school. I went to elementary in Chinatown. That school is no longer up. I went to Francisco Middle School out in Fisherman's Wharf, and then I went to high school at Thurgood Marshall and Bayview Hunters Point. So I've been all around the city. I went to college at San Francisco State University, where I majored in Asian American Studies and got into student organizing and got into community organizing. And through student organizing and working with a bunch of different people, I started volunteering at Manila Town Heritage Foundation, which is the old iHotel Manila Town Center. And then one thing led to another, and staying with my community, it led me to a full-time gig here at the Banyan Equity Center, where I serve the community as a community service worker. I really loved to draw and paint at the time, and then I also wrote a lot at the time too. So I actually went in as a creative writing major, but when I went through the classes, it was kind of really dry and boring, and for me it wasn't inspiring at all. So I was just kind of stumbling through all my GEs, and one semester I took an ethnic studies course, and our professor showed us a documentary called The Fall of the iHotel. And The Fall of the iHotel is a documentary that came out in 1983 that follows the destruction of Manila Town, or what used to be Manila Town, and the Chinese and Filipino elders who lived there, the 10-year struggle they went through to save the building, the community organizations and members that came out to support the building, and what it meant for affordable housing and human rights and the right to have shelter and housing and all those things. And for me, coming in as a young adult and not having access to images of Asian Americans or Asians who have that social power or have that humanity, and just turning on the TV and either not seeing my face or only seeing similar faces that are used as like a shtick for comedy or something like that. So this was really powerful, and I was like, whoa, I didn't know that my community looked like this, or that we could do something like this. And so that documentary really turned my life around, and I immediately decided to major in Asian American Studies. So when I was way younger in high school, I met a crew of b-boys in my high school who used to practice in the hallways. I thought it was the coolest thing. They taught me how to do graffiti and draw still. So through that and like dance, I also tried to be a girl for like a few months, and it's really hard, so I kind of gave up. But I've always admired what they do, and I always supported them at like events and stuff like that.
Mike Lynch owns and operates Babylon Burning Screen Printing.
It's funny, when I moved out here from Maine in 1987, I remember I was looking for a job. I did some screen printing on my own in Maine. Did I say I was from Maine? Mm-hmm. Actually, I'd never been on an airplane. My first airplane trip was here.
What brought you here?
All my friends, because we had all my friends from Boston and from Maine, they all moved out here. And I was like, there were 30 kids. Wow. We were kids back then, that moved out here.
What was the draw?
I think the draw was just, getting away from the snow, just a change of scenery, right? We grew up in punk rock days of the late 70s and early 80s. And then it kind of had been like burning out in the East Coast, I mean, the music scene was great. Oh, the music scene in Boston was so good. But I think it was just a change of pace for everyone. And teenagers and early 20s, we all moved out here. It was great. It was like a second wave of like music and going to shows. Definitely didn't go to as many shows as I did, but it was more, now I could go to bars. So it was like kind of going to bars and hopping around. But I had dabbled in some screen printing in Maine. Me and a couple of friends had some ideas for shirts, and we did them. really low key, low budget ones.
Were they for bands or
yeah,
political?
Bands,
or?
and then trying to sell some to local stores, consignment and stuff. But they were hokey and whatever. The ideas now they seemed great then, but they weren't. We need a Humphrey Bogart T-shirt. Everyone wants a Humphrey Bogart T-shirt. Really? They didn't. But anyway, so when I got out here, my brother had already lived out here. I have a brother 3 years older than me, a younger one also, who's still in Maine. But and he, I don't know, for some reason, I don't know if it's reverse psychology. He's like, you're never going to find a job out here.
Good luck, kid.
Yeah, good luck, kid. Never going to find one. And then I remember applying for a job on a place on Shipley Street, which is right up between 5th and 4th, between Folsom and Harrison. Little street called Shipley's, right by Harvey's. I went there, applied for the job of folding T-shirts, and I got it. And then I had it for the next 12 years.
Wow.
I know. I never had a job before. Then I worked for the next 12 years there. Gave my life away to Harvey's because I didn't have an ID, and he would just run up tabs, and I used to give my whole paycheck to him. And then it was funny story is I wanted to get into printing, but I was just folding shirts. And then a guy came in to print shirts, and he looked like he knew what he was doing, and he was working really fast. And I kind of remember feeling jealous. I was like, oh, I wanted that gig because they needed a printer. But I just wasn't experienced enough yet, I guess. But then the guy worked for 3 hours, did a whole bunch of shirts, and nobody was really watching him. And then he never came back from lunch. And then they went over and looked, and he had screwed up all these shirts. He was half printing them and stuff. And that's where my career kind of took off. My boss at the time said, you want to learn how to print? And then I started printing, and that was in 87.
Kind of then, right place at the right time.
Yeah,
maybe?
Right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Then printed for he had all local stuff too, right?
What was the name of that shop?
It was called Graphic Sportswear. Still around, still friends with these guys.
Yeah.
They were like my bad fathers, right? They were like, because I was a teenager, all doing drugs and drinking, and they were older than me, but they, would let me partake and let me stay in their place, crash on their place, on their floors and stuff. But they kind of looked after me too, because I was definitely a newbie in San Francisco. So then I worked there for a long time. Wasn't really, I printed for a long time, but it's a real burnout job. It's really hard on your body, and after a while, I learned how to run the automatic, and that's a little bit easier on your body. But I mean, it wasn't really fulfilling. I was, partying too much and trying to get a new career, and so I got sober, which really helped me, and then started looking into going to school. And I went back to school. I couldn't figure out City College, so I started going to College of Marin. I was screen printing in the daytime, 8 hours, and then 3 hours over to Marin and back, and it's horrible.
Yeah.
But I did it. I did it for about 4 years, and still didn't graduate from college. But then I went to paramedic school, thinking I was going to do a whole new direction. That didn't work out, and then I had a whole bunch of friends that worked at Babylon when Babylon was on 2nd and Howard Street.
Okay.
And this would be in the early 90s.
Okay.
Early 90s. My brother had some shirts in there that the old owner would print and did consignment for him. And so I had a whole bunch of friends that worked there. I knew about the place. But when Babylon moved to this location where it's at now at 63 Bluxome Street in 1989, right after the earthquake, I started working here part-time. I was going to school. I had quit Graphic Sportswear. I was working here sort of part-time, still going to school. And then I wanted to get away from printing altogether.
Well, I was going to ask real fast, what about this place made you want to work here versus...
Well, at the time, I just needed a job. And I had already had 10 years of screen printing, so I was a pretty experienced printer. While I was going to school, because I was thinking, paramedic, that's what I want to be, which didn't work out. But then I said, maybe I'll get on the other side of it. Maybe I'll get on sales. And then I got a gig at this place called Crux Productions, and I was doing sales. My boss at the time had Shepard Fairey as a client, and so I worked with Shepard, and I was really trying to help him push Obey.
Darnay McPherson grew up in the Fillmore in the 1960s.
The Fillmore, well, like I said earlier, it was like more of a family-oriented neighborhood where you can go anywhere, anytime. You didn't have to worry about crime, and the streets were just like full. A lot of restaurants, movie theaters, and it's a friendly environment.
Where exactly did you grow up?
My first home that I remember was on the old projects, right there on the Darryl, between Bush and Sutter.
Okay.
Where you had a Russian Center up there right now.
Okay.
That was all projects, and that's where I was born, right there.
And you were born at which hospital?
San Francisco General.
All right. Okay, and then after that, did your family move?
Yeah, we moved up on Golden Gate and Baker. We was always, in the Fillmore.
Yeah. What kind of things did... So, I guess when you're, you said your memories kind of start at 5, around age 5. So,
right.
What kind of things did you do in the neighborhood?
Well, mostly as I grew up, we just like to bike ride a lot and ride coasters. We built our own coasters. We go to a garage, see if they give us some ball bearings. We'll go to a construction site and beg for wood. So, we just being typical kids. We did our own building, like I said, our coasters, and riding them up and down hills, doing things we shouldn't be doing, like going down the hill on Steiner Street right across Oak, as soon as the light turned yellow. So we're just doing typical kid things.
The kind of things that parents tell their kids not to do, but then when they were kids, they probably did it too.
Well, no, don't, stay in the neighborhood, which we didn't. Don't go by water, which we did. Fishing, going on dangerous piers, and I still can't swim right today. So I think about all the things I did coming up as a kid. I was lucky. Yeah. Somebody's watching over me. Yeah. We used to ride the N Judah, jump on back of it and ride through the tunnel.
Wow. On a bike or
no,
just
we'd run and jump on back
on?
of it, yeah, and ride through the N Judah tunnel. Just imagine if you fell. Yeah. But we had no fear then. No fear. It was just a lot of fun.
Did you keep your eyes open in the tunnel, or?
Oh yeah. And we used to walk through it too.
Yeah. You see anything down there?
No, we didn't see anything but the trains coming. You can see the light, and they had little holes in the walls. So we'd jump in the hole when the train is coming. And then when the train passed by, we'd start walking through again.
Yeah.
Fun. So we just did a lot of crazy things.
You mentioned fishing. So as a kid, would you ride your bike down to the piers, or
yeah, we'd ride our
the train? Or?
Yeah, we'd go with some older friends that like to fish. I'd never been a fisherman, but it was just being a kid and just going with the crowd, having fun.
What part of which piers would you go to?
We'd go down there. Down by it's one down way down off Venice. It's a pier, behind
by the aquatic park and all that. Yeah,
down that way. They had an old pier out at the beach one time, and we used to walk that pier, and the waves would be coming.
Ron Turner moved from the Valley to San Francisco in the 1960s and founded Last Gasp Publishing.
We started off officially as Last Gasp Eco-Funnies Company, and that was in 1970. We started having meetings in 69, so 50 years ago we were starting to have meetings about publishing a benefit book for the Berkeley Ecology Center, which was the first ecology center in the country, and of course needed funding, and we thought the coolest thing around was underground comics, and if we wanted to pitch a message to youth, about ecology. Let's use what's the best thing that's being let in through the retinal bars at that time. So we chose Underground Comics, and then the only problem was we had to figure out how to get the money to pay for it, and then what to do after we got it, and how do we get artists, and do things get printed, how do they get bound up, and how do they get distributed. It's all very curious. So I took on the job of doing this, and when we finally got the comic book done in time to be sold on college campuses for the first Earth Day, the Berkeley Ecology Center had changed. By much of the staff had gone away in this 8 months since we'd started the project with them, and they didn't know what to do with it. We said, well, it's your benefit book. And they said, well, we'll take 10 copies. I said, 10 copies? I printed 20,000. Are you crazy? So anyway, I went back, and they were all in my garage, and I had to start selling them. And we come up with the name Last Gasp because we were trying to figure out what the name should be for the comic book. And there were many choices, and one of them, the choice for the comic book that won, was called Slow Death Funnies. And this was a great comic. It was full of everything. One of the cartoonists, every time I handed them a script about something, they'd say, "Oh, it's okay, I already got my own." The smart people were already into what was going on ecologically 50 years ago. And so you'd only hope that people have learned a little bit more since then. And so we needed a company name, so the runner-up was Last Gasp, Eco Funnies. So I took that for the company name. And fast forward, here we are now.
50 years later?
Well, yeah, it was 1970 Earth Day that we went out. And we picked, just because it was fun, our Founders Day at April 1st. It seemed like a perfect April Fool's Day, because it's a pretty foolish idea. What am I doing now? I've got a garage full of, just lost my job at Kaiser Hospital. Nixon had cut the funds for the science things as the Vietnam War started to collapse. And although there was much more war to go, but it was already you could see that it was not nowhere to go. It was cost the economy everything, and it had to be paid for. And the cover is by the late great Greg Irons, who was a poster artist and a cartoonist, and he knew all kinds of. He was a smart guy. He became a tattooist, and his vision was, since we just landed on the moon in 1969, his vision was, here is a monster rising off the earth where it's already eaten part of the earth. And in its hair are the symbols of all the corporations that it represents. And then it's got one long arm reaching out and, just touching its evil claw onto the moon. So that was pretty much. And we had all kinds of ideas in there, and I was so happy that Robert Crumb did a piece for it. He everybody it's hard to predict the future, and he predicted that Flaky Foont and Mr. Natural would be out on the Golden Gate Bridge together, discussing why Flaky was going to go jump off the bridge in his depression. And so Flaky jumps, but he lands in mud because by this time the oceans have dried up. So Crumb's vision of the future at that point was that it was going the other way. Somehow we'd lose all our water, and so it was kind of interesting, but both basically the same effect either way.
KRmorrison is a poet, a teacher, and a musician.
97, I moved here after high school, and I fell in love with the place right away. I mean, being from two types of family that were like night and day, I don't know, I don't really think I felt like I fit into anything. And I had already at that point discovered hardcore music and had made a lot of friends that made me hungry to be someplace where I could be myself on my own terms. without any obligations to either side of the family. So I came here and got into a college here, and I never looked back. I moved to England for a little while in '99 for college, but then returned here to finish and went home for a quick second degree, and then came back just a couple years later. So more or less I've been here 21 years.
What was it about San Francisco in 1997? It was a quite different place.
I was thinking about this all day and all day yesterday because I saw that the other episode, and I thought, God, because it is different. It's a lot different, and I feel like I've been here through all like this huge process. So kind of like looking at yourself in an old photograph, and you're like, holy shit, I've changed so much, but you never really saw the evolution. Like, it's so different from then, but then you feel kind of arrogant saying that because there's people that were here in like 91 or 89 that look at me and giggle, and they're like, oh, honey, you know, like I was the first wave of gentrification, if you want to get real about it. Well, I don't know. I think the difference between us when we came here is we participated in the texture of what was here. Like, you know, when I was in the mission, I spoke Spanish. When, you know, I was around artists, I made art with them. When I'm around music, I would support local music, and I'd be a part of local music. I didn't come here and change everything, and in that sense, that's what's changed. I mean, it was the first place I had ever been in California that had a music culture, that had an art culture, that had young people just hungry to be a part of things bigger than themselves that they could actually inform also. And that, the only time I really see that now is with my immediate friends here, that we all kind of hide out and find each other, you know. And that's what it was then. God, I still remember coming here and being like, I felt like a little kid. I felt like jogging cross country. You know, I had a lot of family stuff happening around me at the time. I'm blessed to say we all got past that, but at the time I needed to go somewhere where I could just figure out what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be on my own terms, and not without owing anyone anything or keeping people sane, and, you know, just come here and get creative and go to school. I don't know if it was like the space because it's so small or what, but I feel like it had an intimacy here then that when I would go to New York, or if I go to New Orleans, or if I went anywhere where there was also the same kind of ingredients, it was too much for me. Whereas here, it was so close and everybody was so close by, and then writers were also playing music and musicians were also, oh, you can speak another language also, oh, you have the same politics as me, oh, you have issues with like the way capitalism is changing everything, so do I. And like finally not feeling reprimand for it, or like I'm somehow being entitled by critiquing something I saw as unfair really young, you know. And I got that mouth everywhere else. I have a lot of stories. It's kind of like, oh shoot, what do I tell? The two bands, Harriet and I. That's my sort of family band. We became musicians together, and I call us the Viking Band, or at least I call the girls that. They're all mothers who basically fight to stay artists, because now that they're moms and wives, they're constantly told by everything around them, speaking of our system, that they can't and that they should feel bad, and that, you know, so I'm very proud to be in that band. And we've been off and on for about 9 years.
That's Harriet with an O.
With
right?
an O. Harriot. We were trying to think of the girl that's like super rad, super cute. Everyone likes her. She might skateboard or something very cool about her, but then just when you think she's super cool, she like eats shit down the stairs at prom night, you know, like she's kind of a goofball
and kind of my hero
and kind of your hero, like Ramona the Pest-esque.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how we came up with it. We really were all just stumbling to figure out our instruments when we started, and I'm really proud to say we're a really good band now. And the girls write amazing stuff, and I do some songwriting in the band.
Darryl Lim grew up in North Beach in the midst of the hippie movement.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff I loved as I got older. I just loved growing up in North Beach. I love the first coffee I ever had in my life was an espresso at Cafe Trieste. And then when I was in 5th grade, I went to the first class of the hippie school is called Rooftop School. And it was just, and we call all of our teachers are all hippies. They had big old beards and long hair, and they all the women wore like these moo patched up dressy things, and we had chickens that we had to take care of. We called everybody by all the teachers by their first name, and we sang this folky opening song. We didn't sing the Pledge of Allegiance. We sang like some open the door and come on in song with a guitar. It was really funny, but it was and we had one period where we would go to the park every day. And it was a hippie school, and it was amazing, actually.
I want to go to that school. It sounds great.
When they started, it isn't that way anymore since it became part of the school system completely.
Right.
And they changed the curriculum, and they hire proper teachers now. But we had this amazing, like, it was just the same kinds of people, the people that hung out at City Lights. And, like, we had this one teacher, Mr. Nice. Oh, my God, that was the funniest thing.
Was that his real name?
Yes, his name was Mr. Nice. But, he was a little... I wouldn't say he was nice. He was a little... He liked kids, but they would annoy him, and he would, like, discipline you vocally. But he was the best storyteller. Because he would visually do things when he would read stories to you. Like, he'd reenact the wind, and he'd reenact all the animal voices. And we loved him. I mean, he was amazing. No, actually, in school, I was invisible, really. Because it was, I think it's also, when you're like a young gay person, you're not like everybody else, but you can't really talk to anybody. And something's going on, but it's also hidden underneath things. Because, when you're 10, it's not, your sexuality doesn't come out sexual. It comes out as these little weird feelings and impulses.
Yeah, you don't always have vocabulary.
And you don't know what it is, but you're not like everybody else. So my reaction to it was to become invisible. Mm-hmm. And that's how I dealt with it all the way through high school. Mm-hmm. Until high school, high school I was pretty out. Because we had our little gay group. We had all of our, like, we all figured out how to get, like, IDs, and we all went out to the clubs. I don't know how we did that. And we were like, I had no money, and my one girlfriend, she grew up in the hood, but her idol was Grace Jones. Felicia Alexander, I hope you hear me. And she got me in more trouble, but we had fun. It's very much a part of, like, my life as a San Franciscan, and also as a gay man who went through it from the beginning, from the late 70s all the way until the cocktail, and now we have, PrEP, which has basically kept things, which has changed everything. Mm-hmm. And it worries me a little bit, but but we're just human, and we're just trying to figure it out, I think. But it's basically completely molded how I live and how I think, how I deal with grief. Because at the height of it, I've lost an entire phone book of friends.
Right.
And then we talk. My friends of mine who are survivors who know about it, we talk about things like how we were afraid to call people at a certain point, because back in the old day when it was happening, and there was no drugs or anything, and Reagan could barely even he wouldn't even mention it at all. But people were dying within 3 to 6 months from diagnosis. I remember Star Pharmacy, which is Walgreens now in the Castro, and when it first happened, they had this little sign on the door with pictures, and they said, if you see this, go see your doctor. You may have this thing that's spreading through the community. And back then it was hard because it was in your face. You could see it walking down the street. You could see it even I remember walking down Market Street in front of what's Bloomingdale's now, and you could see certain people walking by, and you knew because their head. It wasn't just the disease visually, but it was the soul of the person. And what's interesting is, like, before it happened, it was really wild here, but it was innocent and it was sweet. And I don't want to say sweet. It was kind of out there, but it was just, I remember just, San Francisco was all into exploration about who you were and why you came to San Francisco. It was like, what's her name from Wizard of Oz? Judy Garland's character?
Dorothy.
It was like Dorothy coming, like, to the big city, and it's like, and there were more than munchkins here, I tell you.
Jessica Christian is a photographer for the San Francisco Chronicle.
Right after that was the death of Eric Garner and Mike Brown, kind of the start of Black Lives Matter. There was a lot of riots in Oakland, protests ended up with police, kind of fighting back the protesters, police brutality of sorts. There was one story I love telling.
Okay.
And I was in college. I was crazy about breaking news, number one. So, like, before my internship, I would stay up all night and listen to the Scanner in my car and just chain smoke, like night crawler style, and go and chase news because I was just, like, wanted to get those photos in. I wanted to get that experience of just, like, this adrenaline. I was obsessed with it. And so after class one night, I had a night class, and it was, like, 10. I was like, I know that there's a protest happening. I want to go over there because it was just a high. In Oakland. Okay. So, like, every night we were kind of going out there. There was just, like, riot police. They're taking the freeway. There was an instance where, like, people trampled me on the freeway, and I had to, like, crawl off the freeway the night before. Jesus. And I was just, like, still running on that energy. So I'm like, let's go out. I know it's going to be, good photos are going to be made, and I want to, like, document. And I was also just, like, at that point, unfortunately, it was more about, like, making cool photos than, like, telling stories because I was just in college, and I was just, like, trying to get better. So I knew that, like, the situation was going to be, like, crazy. And I get there, and I park on San Pablo. I don't remember where on San Pablo, but I walk down the street, and there's, like, some people behind me. I'm like, whatever. They're protesters walking towards it. And I come across my two colleagues, and it was Stephen Lamb, who shoots for Reuters, and Carlos Gonzalez, who's a staff photographer at the Chronicle. He's my mentor.
Okay.
Everyone's in a frenzy, right? And Stephen's sitting on the curb, and he has milk in his face. Like, they're pouring milk in his eyes because he had gotten pepper sprayed by a cop while photographing on the front lines of, like, them trying to take the freeway. And I'm just like, okay, let me help you. And, like, his cameras were sitting next to him. And I watched those guys that were walking and following me because I have two cameras hanging off me. Not smart. Should have just kept them in my bag until I got to my destination, which I always do now. But I was just excited to get there. The guys grab his two cameras and just run off. And so Steven can't even see. He just gets up and starts running towards these dudes. And Carlos goes too. And I'm standing there with two cameras, and there's just flashbangs going off everywhere and people running. And I'm just like, I jump in Carlos's car because they were sitting outside of it. And I put a riot helmet on. And I just hid underneath the seat. And I was like, please come back because I didn't know what to do. I was just, like, freaking out. So Carlos and Steven jump in the car, and he just, like, burns out, and they start chasing this unmarked car through Oakland of these dudes that just stole this cameras. And it's, like, 5 hooded guys in, like, sweatshirts. Just, like, running through Oakland, and, like, I'm screaming at Carlos. I was like, if I die, you're screwed because I'm an intern. Like, you have no insurance. He's like, shut up and take the license plate. So I'm sitting in the back, like, with this helmet on. Because I'm like, if someone going to shoot me, like, I don't know if they're going to come back and, like, start shooting the car. Right. And so, like, I take the license plate down, and I remember, like, someone was taking the freeway, a whole bunch of riot protester things, and I'm jumping, and I'm in the middle of San Pablo, waving my arms, and 2 cop cars just flying by me. Like, no one even cares that I'm standing in the middle of the street, just, like, waving them down. Like, we're trying to just get a cop to, like, make a report on these stolen cameras, but they don't care. Bigger fish too many. Yeah, and then I remember, like, we lost them. We were calling the police station trying to get the insurance information. And Carlos is like, all right, give me a cigarette. So we all just like are smoking in this car, and it's like so free. Like I've never seen, like he's such a strong guy and so like, you know, composed, and he's very like, I've always looked to him as like my savior in those scenes, and he was frazzled.
That
you know?
rattled him, yeah.
It rattled him, and
Yeah.
I was like, oh god. And then I get a text from another colleague who was on the front lines of one of the, you know, where the cops were going to take the freeway. And a cop had he got a photo of a cop coming in at him and smashing his camera, but he got the photo right before he hit with the baton. And his camera was just fucked. So, like, all of us were just, like, so out of it and burned out of just, like, all this craziness going on.
Yeah, stuff stolen, disarray,
it
a
was
chase.
just, I've never been in that scene. But, like, and after that, they're like, all right, we're going to take you off protest duty for a little bit. Because I was an intern, and they didn't want me to get hurt. They didn't want me to get, like, my stuff stolen.
Yeah.
And I just think back, because, I mean, I'm 25, and that was all when I was, like, 21.
Whoa.
That wasn't long ago, but I'm like, when I was a kid, you know, running
Yeah.
around the city not knowing anything.
Yeah.
But it's a good, like, learning experience to be in those situations.
Sure.
Don't ever want to be in that again voluntarily,
Right.
but I know I could get through it.
Next is Edie Wolfe, who worked at SF General Hospital at the outbreak of the AIDS epidemic.
You know, I worked on 5A at the AIDS unit for about 3.5 years, and you know, I mean, you can just imagine what the doctors, the nurses, the counselors, what all of us looked upon regularly, trying to help, trying to make a difference in a time when there was just so little that could be done. And then again, you know, you have to have very good boundaries, because you're going to burn out. You never give patients your home phone number. You never follow up with people. You never give patients money. You stay boundaried. You stay in your role, and you help them by being the kind professional delivering the service you're supposed to, and not stepping out of that role. There was a homeless man with AIDS who came into 5A over and over and over again. His name was Calvin, and he was such an extraordinary character, and difficult and sweet and manipulative. And I was fairly new to the unit, and he could see I was new, and, you know, he was very charming. And right the day before he was discharged, he asked me if he could please borrow $5. And I'd been through all the orientation, and other than giving a patient your home phone number, the last thing you do is give them money, because then they're going to start asking everyone. But you know what? No one was looking, and my heart went out to him. I didn't know where he was going to go, so I gave him $5. So, a couple months goes by, and I get this message from the ward clerk who sits at the front desk where all the people come in. And she goes, Ed, there's someone here to see you. Which is people don't come. What? She said, yes, there's somebody here at the front desk to see you. I said, okay. And we had little beepers, and then I come down, and there's Calvin. And he's standing there. He's got a T-shirt that's barely on him. It's torn. And he only has one shoe on. And in his hand, he has $5. And I, you know, by now, this is all happening in front of the nurses. People are because they all know Calvin. They're looking at me. They're looking at Calvin. And he hands me he reaches this $5 out. So my initial reaction is like, of course I cannot take this money from this man. But then a larger part of me was like, realize what it took for him to come all the way back and pay me back. Because when I gave him the money, he said, I will pay you back. And so I just said, hi, Calvin. How are you? And he said, well, things are going okay, and I wanted to give you this money back. And I just remember I went up, he gave me the money, like all the nurses were like, because I'm not a nurse, I was one of the counselors on the unit, so I know they were watching what was happening. But thank God, anyway, I had the wherewithal to take that money because I could see in his eyes how much this meant to him that he could pay me back. He came back onto the unit several times before he finally passed. And on the unit, we used to keep what we called the big red book. It's this thick book, like bigger than a phone book. And in it, we kept a list of all the people who died on the unit. Like pages and pages. And if people sent back a card, or a mother lost her son and was especially grateful to us and sent a thank you card, we put it in this book. In fact, this book is now part of the Hormel collection at the library, and you can go and see it, but you have to put on like white archival gloves, and it's amazing. But when Calvin died on the unit, you would write the name of the patient and the date that he died, and any little tidbit of information that people could remember about him. And several people wrote after his name that Ed Wolfe loaned him $5, and before he died, he repaid him.
Jonnie Ababa was born and raised in San Francisco and has a story about the 1989 earthquake.
It was weird. It was the World Series. It was the Giants and the A's. And I was working in the marina at a bathing suit shop.
Didn't fare too well?
No.
Okay.
I cannot even remember. Oh, Body Options. That's the name of the store where I was working. And my coworker, who had just moved from Chicago, and I were talking about how much we hated our boss and what a jackass he was. He was like this creepy guy from Iran who seemed like he was super coked out, and he would come in with his dog, and his dog would pee all over the store, and he'd expect us to clean it up.
It was technically the 80s, so being coked out was kind of just, that's how you were.
Yeah, I don't even remember his name. I'll remember his face forever, but I don't remember his name. I just remember we were talking about how much we hated our boss, and I said, let's go outside and talk about this. And she said, why? And I said, I just have a feeling we need to be outside. And the minute we walked outside, the earthquake hit, which is a good thing to do because all the walls were mirrors in the store. So they started cracking. I'm so glad we were outside. And it didn't feel really strong. It was like a rolling earthquake. And so I didn't realize that it had knocked out the phone lines and knocked out the power and collapsed freeways. I didn't realize any of that had happened. So I went to call my mom, and I'm like, oh, the phones are dead. I guess they'll come back. I wasn't even tripping. So I said, well, let's lock up the store, tape up the windows, and walk all of the cash to the main office. So we were on Union Street, and the main office was on Chestnut Street. So I was like, let's just walk all the cash to the main office. So as we were walking, we met this couple who were here from New York who were freaking out.
Tourists.
Yeah. And the girl from Chicago started freaking out, it hit her what was going on, and she started hyperventilating, and I had to slap her to calm her down. If I just slapped somebody to calm them down, it was the most exciting thing to me for some reason, because I was 19 years old.
I was going to ask how old you were and kind of where you were in your life.
Yeah, I was 19.
Out of high school already?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Out of high school with a job, hanging out.
In my own apartment. Thought I was a grown woman. And so we walked over. I got her to calm down. And there was a nursing home on Chestnut Street, like a senior living facility. And they were helping all the old people out. And we were like, oh, do you need help? They said no, and then some guy was giving away free ice cream from his ice cream place, so I got some ice cream cones for the old people.
Hey, yeah, oh, awesome.
Then we went and walked the cash over, and then we realized there were like fires and stuff going on, and like things had really happened, and we were like, oh my God. Wow. So we didn't really know what to do.
After do you think, roughly, like?
It felt like an eternity after, but it was probably like a couple of hours, because we were just kind of meandering about, like, do we stay and see if the power comes back on? Like, what do we do? And then we eventually decided we were going to tape up the store and make sure, like, the door was secure and all that. So it was probably like a couple of hours, and we walked over to the corporate office and no one was there. So we started talking. We'd been talking to these people who were walking with us. They didn't know what to do. And we walked back to Union Street. Union Street to the store. Put the money like in the very back of the store. And then this bar that's not around anymore. It was like an Italian restaurant and bar. Was giving away all its beer because they didn't know when their power was going to come back on. So anything that was like edible, anything perishable, they were giving away. So we got drunk. We didn't know what to do. We didn't want to walk up the hills because I lived in Alamo Square at the time, and I didn't want to walk up all the hills because I was drunk, right? And we started talking to some random guy who was like, well, I'm going to drive home to Daly City, so I'll drop you guys off. So he dropped off my coworker at her place, and then the couple from New York were just like kind of stuck to me like glue. And they get out of the cab with me, and the guy's like, the cab driver wouldn't take any money. Everyone was very nice, like very supportive. Right. So the couple from New York are just looking at me, and I'm like, okay. And I was like, well, did you want him to take you to your hotel? And they're like, no, everyone says it's landfill. It's probably in the water. We don't want to go down there. So these random people from New York, I was like, well, I guess you guys can come to my house, but like, I don't even think I have a flashlight. So we went into my house. I didn't know where my roommate was. My roommate had 2 cats. I couldn't find the cats. So I'm checking on everyone in the building, and it's my family's building that I was renting at the time. So I checked on my aunt. She was cool. Like, everybody was cool. I found the cats. I don't know how this happened. They were underneath the sink, underneath the garbage can, like wrapped around each other. And then we just didn't know what to do, so we were just sitting there chilling, made sure the gas was off, and then the TV...
Did you have electricity at your
Electricity came back on, so we're sitting there watching TV. And I fell asleep. And a spider somehow that had been unearthed during the earthquake bit me on my eyelid, and I had to go to the emergency room. So I was like that jackass after a natural disaster who goes into the emergency room with my eye swollen shut in the size of a golf ball. I felt like such a jerk. The doctor was like, what's going on? I'm like, a spider bit me in my eye, and I can't breathe or see. And he was like, I guess it was it was good I went in because they were like, oh, that's a venomous spider. Like, they had to lance my eye and stuff. It was really gross.
Filmmaker and musician H.P. Mendoza loves video games.
I'll do this. You tell me if this is appropriate or not. Okay. So, we just finished talking about my love for arcades. Mm-hmm. I love arcades. I love it so much that I made a party called Mission Arcade.
Right, you do an arcade.
Yeah, it's it's cheap because it's just like my apartment.
Mm-hmm. You did it kind of. Well, I guess that was a scavenger hunt at the museum.
Oh no, that was one also.
Was that Mission Arcade?
Yeah. So we're probably not going to have too many at the apartment anymore. But the truth is, we've always done it in different areas, different places. So Mission Arcade's kind of like our traveling party just for our friends.
Right.
But what happened was we would just send out the invites and say, hey, we're going to do a Mission Arcade. Here's the address. And people would come and steal from us. There was one time we were saving money. We saved like hundreds of euros for this Europe trip we had. And we stuffed it in a sock in our sock drawer. And at the end of the night, like, we saw all the socks on the floor and all the euros were gone. One time somebody stole Mark's grandfather's false teeth.
I mean...
what Why would you do that? Like, what are you gaining from this? You're not going to pawn that.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that'll make me feel okay is that if he's out there wearing them.
I was gonna say if they're like on their last tooth, and
right,
like,
exactly.
When this one goes, I'm gonna need a spare.
Right, but no, every guest at our party had a full set of teeth. So I don't know who that would have been. But anyway, I had this idea of just saying, okay, what if the invites were just video invites that I post, you know? And they just
video game or video,
yeah, or just like some kind of video based on the theme of the party, and just say Mission Arcade, and that basically tells my friends, you know what that means, you know the address, just show up,
right?
You know, and so I was doing that for a while, and it felt really nice because it's like, oh look, I don't have to clean up as much. I mean, it was still as big as it used to be, but like, oh, these are friends, they're not like, you know, vomiting into my couch or whatever. So yeah, it became Mission Arcade just amongst my friends, right? And then it kind of went on to become something else where it's like, okay, Mission Arcade also meant like whenever me and my friends would like do some kind of like weird a cappella thing online, or we do a tribute, like a musical tribute. And then there's this film festival that started tweeting about how they'd been to Mission Arcade, which I thought was really interesting. And I'm not going to say which film festival it was, but I was feeling a little bit of rejection because this film festival had rejected me for I Am a Ghost. And
but clearly didn't know that you were Mission Arcade.
I don't know. When he was tweeting about it, he was making it sound like, oh yeah, this is H.B. Mendoza's blah blah blah.
Oh, he did know. Okay.
Yeah, at least if I remember correctly. I don't know. I'm stoned, but that should mean that I should.
You should right. It should be right there.
So well, anyway, I mean, really, the crux of what I'm trying to say is that I was a petty little bitch.
Yeah.
Because I was like, oh, look at this asshole.
Yeah.
Fucking douchebag, like name dropping and trying to. You've never been here, so let me see what happens if I create an account called Mission Arcade.
Oh my god.
So I did, and I decided to make it look official. So I posted some invites, some other things, and like retweets of some bullshit game thing, and just to make it look like this is an account for a real establishment. And so I said, "Hey, nice to hear nice things about our establishment. What is it you like? Oh, your drink selection's great, man. Blah 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 blah." And I was like, "Oh, you asshole. Yeah, okay, fine. Well, I know that your festival's going on right now, so tonight's Halloween. If you tell everyone in the audience that if they go to Mission Arcade and use their film festival ticket, they'll get a discount and a free butterbeer." Oh my god! And he's like, "Sweet!" So he tweets it, and I was so proud. I was like, "Oh, this is so great!" And I was like, "Oh, I should probably make like a page that has like an address or whatever." So what ended up happening was I made this web page that just says you know where to go. So it seemed really in the know.
That's all it said?
Yeah.
You know where to go.
Yeah. But then I made a Facebook page and it said, you need to put an address. I'm like, fuck. So I put the police station. So I was like, 630 Valencia. There you go. That's close enough. And I didn't think much of it. We had our Halloween party and that was nice. And then the next day I went to the Facebook page. There was like tons of like hate mail saying like, we're at the police station. Where do we go? And like people were so angry. Of course, right? Of course.
Oh my god.
And I was like, well, we have to make it a thing now.
Yeah.
This should be a thing. Let's make Mission Arcade. Let's do this, and we'll have different games. And it was great because then after that, Mark Mayer over at the Asian Art Museum actually gave me the chance because he was doing this series called Takeover.
Right.
And so I got to take over the museum, 3 floors of it, and the middle section was Mission Arcade. So yeah, that was last year, wasn't it?
And you did a scavenger hunt.
There was a scavenger. Yeah, I actually, for the first time, with the help of a developer, designed a video game, and that was crazy.
That was amazing.
And it was just a super wry. Thank you. It was just scavenger. It was a scavenger hunt, but I was like, look, this is like Mission Arcade times 10.
Right.
But then last year I did the Mission Arcade for my birthday because I was like, okay, I don't want it to be that big.
Right.
But we'll see.
Last year meaning last birthday.
Last birthday. 2017.
Yeah.
2017.
Yes.
Yeah. So
yeah. And then there was a karaoke. Is there always a karaoke component to it?
Yeah, it grew into that.
Yeah.
I have had people tell me, "Oh, we missed the games." Because I think when you do karaoke and dancing at the same time, everyone's gonna be dancing in the dance floor and and for the most part the games fall away. So we'll see what happens next. But yeah, Mission Arcade was born out of a joke, like a really petty joke.
Next is Stephanie Smith, a young tattoo artist.
It's a fond memory, and it's also a weird memory because I kind of was so desperate to get into tattooing that I did absolutely anything to do it, and I ended up paying Sadie for the apprenticeship, which is very not traditional.
Yeah.
it's kind of a weird memory for me to even really talk about because I don't want to talk poorly on her or the shop, but it was definitely, I got fucked a little bit. Like I was working, during my apprenticeship, I ended up working for free as well as paying for the apprenticeship.
Oh, wow.
So that's double kind of what the typical thing is. Typically you just work for free.
Right.
But they basically wanted me to pay the shop with free labor and pay Sadie for the knowledge. All of that stuff, like as much as there was weirdness with all of that, it's all things where that was just what I had to do to get into tattooing, and that's how I'm taking it.
Those are just the means.
Yeah.
To the
and
end.
If it was money that they wanted, take my fucking money. I don't give a shit about the money. I wanted the knowledge, and I was willing to do whatever for it. And you know, it was funny because I did all of that, and then I apprenticed for about a year. And then that was when like the relationship got a little weird, and maybe I didn't work as hard as Sadie wanted me to work. Maybe Sadie didn't want me to work at the shop in the end, but I didn't end up getting hired after my apprenticeship, which Marie, the owner, has since really apologized for, and she really regrets it, which I know she does, and she's tried to hire me back, but at this point I only move forward. There's only a forward trajectory for me, so I passed, but it did feel really good.
I was gonna say
it felt so good, like 6 months after getting let go, to like get a text from the shop and them being like, we want you back, like all of them.
Well,
you know,
I'm guessing you proved it with not only your labor but your art.
Yeah, it was weird because, you know, my tattoos weren't where they should have. I mean, I don't know. It's, you know, when my apprenticeship was over, I didn't really feel like I was ready, but who feels ready when it's over? So I kind of got pushed out, and I think that at that moment it felt terrible. It felt like the end of the world, and a month from then it was the best decision that could have come out. Like, it was the best outcome, because right when I moved on to Brain Drops, basically I got hired at Brain Drops by Trevor Thomas, who I had met through working at Club Tattoo. Brian Blanco was a tattooer there who also worked at Club Tattoo, and he was the buddy who was like, you should hire this girl, she'll be great. He like really went to bat for me. So I'm eternally grateful to Brian, and that dude was when I feel like I really started to learn how to tattoo. That guy's technical skill is insane. His line work is like perfection. He's such a great tattooer, and he's such a humble dude that nobody knows about him. He's like so anti-social media, so anti-hype, that he won't put himself out there. So Brian Blanco, you're an amazing tattooer. I hope you get a bunch of clients from this.
And sorry, but you're on the internet now.
Yeah, now you're on the internet. Sorry, dude.
But you said, so now you're doing it.
So yeah, basically I was like, so this is a funny thing too. Sadie told me that I was going to have to reapprentice somewhere else, and that I would never get hired as a tattooer. And I was like, okay, my tattoos aren't great, but they're not what that is. Like, I don't have to start over. I know that I have learning left to do. There's always learning left to do. And so, yeah, I was like, okay, thank you for 2 years of my life and all the money that I gave you. Fuck off. I'm going to go work somewhere else. And that's what I did. And it was only a block and a half down the street. So they got to watch me just bloom, which was really cool too. So
a nice kind of pun there, because a lot of your tattoos are flowers.
Yeah. Dropping puns.
Okay.
So yeah, I literally flowered there.
And how long did you work there?
I worked for Brain Drops for almost 2 years, I want to say. Brain Drops is it's a shop with a lot of history. It actually just closed last month because they moved to a new location on Haight Street. And I actually helped them with the move, and then some things were different about how he wanted to pay us, and I decided to move on. And just to be honest, I was ready to get off of Haight Street. Haight Street had been my life for like 8 years, so I was like, get me the hell away from Haight Street. And I knew Nakona was here, so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go. This felt like the right time. I had enough clientele to leave Haight and not have to rely on the walk-ins that I was getting. And so I finally was like, I was booked out like a solid month ahead of my schedule. So I was like, okay, that's comfortable enough where I can go possibly work at in a slower neighborhood, but be way happier.
Had Nakona taken over yet, or
he had taken over? Yeah, so he had basically owned this shop for like a year at that point. Yeah, so I just called him up one day and I was like, "Hey man, you want to go for a walk? I got to talk to you." And I just told him everything. I'm pretty straightforward. I'm a straight shooter. I told him that I wasn't totally happy with how things were going at the new location of Braindrops, and the pay, like Trevor was basically trying to make us get paid by check when we're tattooers and, you know, we're private contractors, so we pay the shop. And he had hired new tattooers and he wasn't comfortable with everyone paying him because he didn't feel like he could trust them. Which in my opinion, if you don't trust them, they probably should not work for you. So, and that is a sad story in and of itself because, you know, I'd left and about 5 months down the road they closed their doors. So it is a little bit like, you know, it's with a heavy heart that I'm like, yeah, that shop closed down and it had a ton of history in San Francisco. I wish Trevor would have taken some advice from some friends. We would have all loved to help kind of guide, but it's hard when you expand a business, especially on Haight Street, when you're going from this little rent to way bigger rent. Like the rent was just way too crazy for that shop.
Graham Cowley worked for the San Francisco Medical Examiner's Office for several decades.
In 1995, I'll never forget it. The guy's dead, rolled up in a carpet at the BART station. You know, is it a murder? It's a murder. You know, not necessarily. His buddies who live on the street, they've rolled him up and parked him up in the BART station. You know, down in the bowels of the earth. Mm-hmm. They've got some flowers there and a couple of candles burning. They're doing the Egyptian thing. You know, they're putting they're
entombing,
doing them right.
Yeah,
and so we had to go down there, and we had to go down there right away because the guys that were getting off at midnight had already had a homicide. A kid had been beaten up, and so they wanted us to go notify the family, which we were going to do at 12:30 at night. We were getting ready, but this call came in, the BART station, so we did that. That lasted till around 3.
Wow.
You know, because we had to cover our tracks. We took photographs and did, you know, covered everything. You know, did, you know, possible homicide, and then of course we have to go back to the office and take a shower because we're covered in. We don't have the right. We don't have breathing apparatus or anything.
I saw the picture.
We got a pair of rubber gloves. That's it.
Yeah,
get on with it.
I saw the picture that Peter gave me from the Examiner.
But I was in the tunnel with the fireman, and he's got all.
Yeah.
He's got all the masks and all that.
Yeah.
And it was 1995. HBO. There was a movie on called. It was about an alien or something. It was with Ben Kingsley and Maria Sorvino. Species.
Oh yeah.
Ooh, HBO. And I'd watched it. You know, I always remember vividly from 9 to 11. And the little boy at the end, Forrest Whitaker, comes to help the little boy. And as he goes to reach the little boy who's covered in slime and everything, this tongue comes out. You know, the kid's an alien, and wraps its tongue around, and that's the end of Forrest Whitaker. So I was in the tunnel. And
this is the train tunnel?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I turned to the fireman. I said, "Did you see the movie tonight, Species, on HBO?" He said, "Got off." He'd seen it.
Oh wow.
He'd seen it too. But there we were in the bowels of because it was in New York or something.
Yeah.
So I said, "Yeah, did you see the film tonight?" Freak him out. But anyway, we got back to the office, took a shower, cleaned up, got all this, what do they call it, powder and stuff, which was, what do they call it, that everybody's dying from, that's in the boats. What do they call it? That stuff they put on the inside the...
Not asbestos.
Thank you.
Okay.
We make a great team.
We do. Yeah.
We make a great team.
Think again about retiring from acting. I could feed you your lines.
Asbestos. It begins with an S. Yeah. No. There's an S in it. Asbestos. Yeah. Yeah. There's one S or two S's. get cleaned up. It's 5 a.m. in the morning. We go knock on the door to tell the guy to ruin this family's life that their son won't be on. And it turns out that I knew the guy. I recognized him.
Oh, wow.
I recognized him. We went in. I started telling him that sound. It's almost like animalistic that came from him. The pain that he bellowed out, and which brought the whole house. His brother and sister, his mother, and his grandmother. They came downstairs, and I tell the story. Tell the story of not telling lies, but being, just not telling them everything.
Sure.
I don't know everything. I don't know what happened anyway. I know. So I'm, and then watch this family fall apart before your eyes, knowing that they're going to be ruined for the rest forever.
Yeah.
It's never going to go away. It's going to get better. And as we walked out, the sun was coming up, and I was driving the rig, and I turned to my partner and said, "Hey, I'm done for the day. I can't drive." Again, made the mistake. I put the barrier down. I let my guard down.
With the family.
Yeah. And that happened so many times. You could be, some guys were good at it, or matter of fact, "I'm sorry for you that passed away. I'm sorry about that. Well, just call the office tomorrow and someone will talk to you. There's my card and, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for your loss." And but it never happened. I was, sometimes I could just like,
Right.
I was doing that, but at the same time, my heart was aching.
Yeah.
And so that was, it was hard. But again, you'd go out with your mates, you'd go for a drink, or you'd go, do stuff. But it would play on you. But I survived, and I said, you can only do that for so long.
Sonia Mansfield and David Tracy's first date was at Broken Record in the Outer Mission.
So then we made a date to meet at the Broken Record in the Excelsior, which
Whose
at
idea?
the time, what?
Whose idea?
You picked that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at the time, they didn't have like a real like kitchen in the back. It was all just like corn dogs, and it was like funky corn dogs, basically, to use the term David was using at the time. So it was like alligator and boar and rabbit corn dogs, and
it was like game dogs. It was
Yeah.
like whatever was caught on the
So first date, Broken Record.
So
and we so
and hearing each other's voices for the first time.
Yes.
and hearing each other's voices for the
and
first
I was
time.
like, oh, how disappointing.
Yeah, that's
He's like, "Hi, Sonia, nice to meet you."
Wait,
I'm
do you have a filter for your voice?
I do. I have a filter.
He's like Bane, and
I'm like Bane in Batman. We picked Broken Record because it's kind of, I was living in Burlingame briefly at the time, and it was like a good midway point.
right, because that's when I was still
When
in the
you're in the
hate.
hate.
Yeah.
And we both admitted, and it came over easily in chat, that we're the type of people that we love a good dive bar. Love a good dive bar.
Yeah.
Not a dive bar that's a scene, but just a good dive bar. That's one of the things that I loved about Oakland was the number of dive bars you had access to, where there's so many, and they're so good. And there was never like when you'd go to like, I remember going to the Mission, and I don't know, I was never cool enough to go to some of the bars in the Mission, whereas like it was a far more different experience in Oakland. So Broken Record was kind of promoted as being like, people wrote about it like, it's kind of like a dive bar, but it's not a scene thing. So we picked that place.
Yeah, I feel like San Franciscans, even if they know about Broken Record, it's so far away and hard to get to.
So far.
So it's like, make one trip out there.
Yeah.
And then it's like, that was fun. And I'll go back there maybe in
Right.
some years. Or
It probably still is not a scene.
I think it's probably like that. Yeah.
I don't know if
still
it was
is
ever a
maintained
scene
as-
other than the restaurant in the back, and now the restaurant in the back isn't a scene anymore.
It's
either,
back to
so,
caribou hot
yeah.
dogs or whatever.
They tried to copy and capture the magic of what the Ricky Bobby people did, but it's not as
it didn't.
good now.
It was a little disappointing.
Yeah.
Because we used to go. Well, we went every year on our dating anniversary.
We'd go to Broken Record. We even brought our kid there.
Yeah, we brought our kid there.
They knew, like, we introduced we walked in there with a baby, and, like, by the way, this baby is a product of Broken Record.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're welcome.
Free drinks for the kid.
Yeah, it's like, it's not the first baby, probably.
Yeah.
Probably not.
Like, we'd go to the dog
we lied
show.
to them and say he was conceived in the bathroom so that we could get free drinks.
We went to the dog show, and then after the dog show at the Dog Palace, the Cow Palace, we went to Broken Record and brought the baby with us.
So that night went well, it sounds like. Let's go back to...
It did go... It was a really good date, right?
It was a really good date.
It was one of those, like, we ordered funky sausages in our...
We have a funky sausage story, though.
So David was like, I'm going to order the sausage and you get the beer. And I was like, sure. So I go up and I get the beer and he's going to get the sausage. And he's like, I didn't know what to get because they're all so weird. Like, so I just guessed and got, like, normal ones. And I was like, well, what are they? And he lists them all. He's like, it's like rabbit and alligator and boar and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I've literally had all of that because my dad travels all over the world and kills animals. So I've already had all that stuff.
Probably not in corn dog form.
No, that would have been different.
Turtle dog or whatever.
But it really was like one of those dates where a turtle dog. Turtle dog.
It's the next thing.
That was also David's nickname in college.
Turtle
Super
dog.
Weird.
What up, T-Dog?
No.
No.
But it was one of those dates.
Erin's shaking her head no.
No, it's a no. It was one of those dates where, like, I couldn't believe it was like last call, and I was like, holy shit, like the date's over.
Yeah,
like,
time flew.
So we were just talking about all kinds of stuff, and that was just kind of it.
Made out by the car afterwards.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We did make out by the
stuff.
car afterwards. But that was like, I don't know for you, but for me, I was like...
That's usual. That's the usual. That's
no,
the go-to.
I mean, seriously.
That's every day.
Dude, that's like every...
What's special about
no,
that?
for me,
look,
like every
it's
Friday.
Guy.
Fucking every Friday. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
For
You're
me,
not
it was,
special.
For me, it was...
For you, it was really special?
It had been years. Years.
Sister Roma is the most photographed nun in the world. So you came here because of your friend.
Right.
What did you think when you...
Oh, my gosh. Well, like I said, Grand Rapids was very conservative and Christian Reformed, and I even thought for a minute that I would like to be a school teacher. So I took some student teaching, and I love working with the kids, but there is no way in Grand Rapids, Michigan that you could be a gay man and be a teacher in the 80s and 70s, the 70s and 80s. Like, it just was not an option. And even though I personally never felt really attacked or persecuted or bullied or less than, I just realized that there were limitations for me in that town and in that community. So when I came to San Francisco to visit David, the first thing that just stunned me was the sheer beauty of the physical landscape of San Francisco. I mean, everywhere that you go, you're either looking up at something amazing and breathtaking mountains, or you're looking out at a gorgeous ocean and the bridges, or you're looking at the lights of the city and the skyscraper. I was just like, oh my God. Coming from this pancake flat area where I grew up and seeing this, I was like, this is insane. Why do they build houses on these hills? How do people walk? Like, the whole thing was just, I was like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. Here we go. We're back to The Wizard of Oz.
Here we go.
So
not only did they build houses, I mean, the houses here are special.
Yeah, and they're amazing looking. They look like they're out of a fairy tale.
They're tall.
They're tall,
wide,
and they're ornate,
and
painted crazy colors, and I mean, just everything about it. But the thing that cinched it was, we're at the cinch.
We're
and
at
cinched
the
it.
cinch.
Oh, this is also full circle. The thing that really cinched it for me was I came during June, and it happened to be Gay Pride. Mm-hmm. Something that I had no idea even existed. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that you could be gay and be proud. And I didn't know that there were a million other people just like me in the city at that particular time. So when I stumbled upon Gay Pride and found myself at the parade, which marched down the middle of Market Street through the financial district to the steps of City Hall, and people were joyous and expressing themselves so openly and freely and beautiful, and I was just like, I'm getting emotional because I was like, I can't believe this.
Yeah.
Like, this is where I have to live. So I went home and I just told everybody how much I loved it. But the thing was, HIV and AIDS was scary.
Was it already called AIDS at 83? That's where my timeline breaks down.
Yeah. I think you might be right. I don't think that it might
have been gay cancer
around that time.
still,
Yeah, because there was the GRID and there was Kaposi's and all that other stuff, gay cancer. Yeah, so that's when I graduated from college, was 1985. So I went home and I told people, started to say how much I love San Francisco, and they're like, oh, well, if you move there, you'll be back or you'll die of AIDS. Like, that was basically the nice, so I started to, So I started to tell people, well, maybe I'll move to Los Angeles, just because for some reason in my mind that would be a more acceptable solution to my mother and to my family and stuff, and it wouldn't upset people so much. I don't know why I said it. I lied because I knew I was going to live in San Francisco, hands down. And now, looking back in retrospect, I realized that there probably was not a better place to live, because San Francisco was at the forefront in the war against HIV and AIDS, and leaders in education and prevention and fighting for rights and helping people get medicine and insisting on research. And caring. The community was caring for themselves and each other. So this was the best place that I could have lived.
Yeah.
When I came here, though, I still was like a kid in the candy store. I had a good 2 years where I was just like drinking it up and just slutting it up and just absolutely having the time of my life. But you couldn't be a gay man and carry on and be promiscuous without being afraid for HIV and AIDS, especially me, who had really no understanding about what it was or how it was really how to get it. I didn't get involved with all of that until I met the sisters.
Okay.
So prior to that, I was just living the gay dream, but every day I would check my tongue for white spots and wonder, did I sweat last night? Am I having night sweats? It was something that every gay man had on their mind.
Next is Margaret Casey, one of several houseboat-dwelling storytellers we've had on the show.
And I guess back in the day, it was like, well, who didn't have a brother or a sister or a cousin or somebody in the family run away and join a cult in San Francisco? So when it was decided that my brother David needed to stay away a bit longer, these old friends of my sister's were, summoned from the beyond, and so he could have a safe place to stay.
So you're like, you needed a change of scenery.
Yes.
And your brother lived here.
Yes.
Where did he live? Where in the city?
He lived at the corner of 16th and Albion in an old firehouse. For people who remember the Albion Club, it was kitty corner from there. And at the time, it was a nightclub. It was called Firehouse 7. He had a gig there under the name of DJ Mink. And he lived in the tower part of the firehouse, the old lookout tower.
Is this the building that's... you said it's kitty corner from Albion now?
Yeah, but only because there's a sort of little jag in Albion.
Is it right across that little alley from Kilowatt? Is that the building I'm thinking of?
Yeah, Kilowatt.
Yeah.
Kilowatt's what... the last name I remember it was called.
That Kilowatt is still called the Kilowatt.
Okay, so...
a little different, but no live music.
Yeah, so back in the day it was Firehouse 7, and he was upstairs in the lookout tower, and the other neighbour at the front was Bear magazine, which at the time was a very popular sort of hardcore gay magazine. So interesting mix of neighbours, and it was right in the middle of the crack epidemic, so there were a lot of people literally crawling around on the streets. And this was before pagers or cell phones, and there were payphones everywhere. And back in the day, if you wanted to score, you had to call your dealer first. So around every payphone there was always a cluster of people who we came to lovingly refer to as the jive turkeys. I don't know why, but the name just it just fit. So people would call their dealer and then hang up and then wait for the dealer to call them back at the payphone, and then you could go and collect. So I didn't have a lot of money at the time, and of course I was very, very new. And yeah, I spent a lot of time observing the jive turkeys and the various things that would happen in the street. There was a lot of funny characters there. There was a guy named the Red Man who was completely covered in some kind of red ochre, and he wore a hat, and he had a little sort of, Gomez Adams type moustache, and he didn't do anything so much as he just was. So you would see him here and you'd see him there at Adobe Books, and there was another guy named Swan, tall, lanky guy, who lived in a tiny Volkswagen Beetle, and he issued this newsletter. I guess he photocopied or whatever, but it had the tiniest handwriting you ever saw, like the size of an ant. So it was extremely difficult to read this manifesto that he put out every week.
He was letting you into his mind.
He was.
Yeah.
He was, because you could barely get into his car for all the stuff that was in. There was another guy there right on the corner of 16th and Valencia who sold newspapers at the front of a grocery store there, and he always had an enormous rat on his shoulder. And I never bought a newspaper from him. I just couldn't. But he was a fixture for many years. And then back at the firehouse, my brother's wife had, because he had acquired a wife at this point in time, and she would refer to this person she called the crack princess, and according to her, the crack princess would keep her would let her know if there was anything going on down in the street that she should know about. So at one time I saw her, as many times that I saw her do this, like bring down a little plate of food for the crack princess, like she was a cat. She's gonna put out the food and the cat would come by. But the crack princess was around for a long time. I don't know if she ever gave Marla the heads up about what was going on, what was going down in the street, but she put a lot of store by that method of communication.
Gary Weinstein drove for Muni for many years.
And then got to California the first day of summer 1971.
Wow.
And the very next day I was working at the clothing shop. And little did I know that at that time, this shop was like very famous for artists, musical artists, all kinds of different people used to shop at this place.
Do you remember names of people or bands or anything?
I remember like Jay Giles Band, Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead. One of my favorite bands was called the Jay Giles Band, and they had a guy named Magic Dick that used to play harmonica, and I loved harmonica. I used to play it once in a while, and he wrote a list of like where I could get all these blues albums, and we soon became friends, and they'd visit once in a while, and then after that, I went to North Beach Leather. And I worked there for about 6 months, but I had taken a Muni exam. One of the people that I waited on in the town square suggested that if you like driving, you'd like this job. And
were you taking Muni yet?
Yes, I was taking it every day, but I never thought about driving.
Yeah.
Of course, being a male who loved hot cars and I loved driving. So I had taken the test, and I gave myself a year to hear from them, that if I got it or didn't, So when I went to North Beach Leather, they wanted me to move to Atlanta and open a store in Atlanta. But I got a notification from Muni that I passed the test and I was going to be hired. So I decided not to go to Atlanta, which is a good was a good idea back then, and it's even better now that I'm retired.
What was the Muni test like? Was it a written test, driving? What do you do?
The first part was a written test, basic things about signs, what to do in brake problems, etc., etc. And then they did a visual and oral exam, and once that was passed, then you were hired.
What's the oral exam like?
How are you with people? Yeah. Mostly people kind of questions.
Yeah.
But I would suggest to anybody out there, if you want a good job with the city, go down and make an application. I've told many people to. One was a chef. I suggested he go take a test. He took it and passed, and then he started working in the jails. And he loved it. No cleanup. All the guards clean up. So he just had to basically set a menu and,
do it.
Bring it forward. Right.
Yeah.
So, and I've suggested to other people about meter maids and police force. There's a good and a reliable retirement with Muni, as opposed to, I'd say, the city or the federal government. The city's so monetarily strong over all the years I've lived here that they've never had to do anything where they reduce pay or anything like that.
Yep. So they told you that you passed the test. What's next?
Then you went to a training course, which was, I think, 6 to 8 weeks. Could have been longer. I can't remember that part. But you went out with 3 or 4 guys, driving, switching, learning. Basically, that's, how to drive a bus. Mm-hmm. But I will say that the very first day, and if you've lived in San Francisco long enough, in the 70s, the buses were buses from the 40s and the 50s. Not reliable, not really good with brakes, and they had different things like clutches on them and different things you had to learn. So I'm driving with a trainer who's just opposite me. I'm driving, he's sitting next to me, and we're driving down Stockton in front of Macy's, going about 15 miles an hour, and I went to apply the brakes, and the brakes didn't take, and I kept pumping the brakes. Then I opened the door, which was supposed to stop the bus, and it didn't. And then I pulled the emergency brake, which was almost like a car brake, on the left side. I pulled it up, nothing happened, and then, boom, we hit this black man's 50-something truck, and I swear, I'm laughing inside and telling the story, and when I hit this truck, everything kind of fell off. The side things on the truck, the back things in the back. I'll never forget it. I thought, God, I only hit the guy at 15 miles an hour. And then when I went back to the station, eventually they charged me with the accident, but the trainer was saying, hey, this guy did everything he did to stop the bus. So I don't know whatever developed on that. I'm sure the guy bought a new truck, though.
Author Adair Lara wrote an award-winning column in the Chronicle for 16 years.
And that started when, I think it really started when I met Nene McCabe. She was Charles McCabe's daughter. And he had recently, I think it was recently, died and been found dead in his Telegraph Hill apartment. And this is where she was living. You know, it's the kind of apartment where the landlord's weeping outside because hoping that somebody will eventually die. And he did, so I don't know how that worked. But in any case, Nene McCabe, and we had a writing club called Daughters of Irish Alcoholics.
Is there an acronym for that? Daughters of
DIA.
Irish.
The DIA club. And her father was the famous curmudgeon Charles McCabe. Now, what did he drink? Was it called the Green Death? It was always at this bar, I think, called the Cafe Spore. No, that doesn't sound right. People who
over
know
in North
will
Beach,
correct me.
or
Definitely in North Beach.
Yeah.
Anyway, so it's just a writing club where you exchange writing. But at about this time, I was starting to send those pieces into the Sunday Punch, which was the Sunday paper of the San Francisco Chronicle.
Okay.
Right, and they were appearing, these little, just sort of short humor pieces. And the features editor then was named Rosalie Wright, and I started running into her at places, events of various kinds, and she liked my writing. And that led that summer, I was working for magazines then, to her asking me to do 10 sample columns with the idea of writing a column for the Chronicle. This is terribly exciting to me, right? And I produced 10 columns, which I produced to have, I pretended to have just whipped off. Right, like I wasn't busy last night. Here were 3 of them, but actually, had been things I'd had lying around for years, and were now. I took time off from my magazine job to work on them, that sort of thing, and gave them to her in, I guess, late June that year. This is 1989.
Okay.
And she turned them over to her superiors. The editor of the Chronicle then was a man named Bill German.
Okay.
But no, she never heard anything, and I never heard anything. And months went on, and German was, visiting the Appalachians of France or something. Everybody was gone. And so, you know how you do. I sent a letter saying that I'd had other offers, right? Which was completely a lie.
Yeah. I'm busy.
Well,
Yeah.
But if they like you, they usually believe that you've had other offers. And I said that if by the end of the summer I hadn't heard anything, I would just view this as not happening, right? And I swear to God, August 31st at 5 p.m., they called me into the office and hired me.
Nice.
And Bill German was then 72. If you'd been around San Francisco very long, you would know this editor. And I said, "What do you want me to write about?" And he said, "Just write about your life," which was, nobody was doing that then. This was called a personal column. I'm not sure we even had that name. But there wasn't this kind of column before, not really. I mean, various people who had produced what are called personal columns about their lives would say that a person has 6 or 7 of those columns in them for a lifetime, this kind of stuff. But it's what I did. So they hired me, and I was just completely thrilled. I'd just broken up with this guy named Neil, and I had to sort of start going with him again so I could tell him. But I was terrified. There had been an earlier columnist who had actually taken out, I heard this, ads on buses asking people for ideas for his column. Oh my goodness. And I naturally remember all the time it took me to actually write the columns that got me hired. And so, well, at that pace, I could produce, 5 a year.
Right.
And it was supposed to be twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday.
Wow.
This was, we called it Folsom Prison, I think it was, but it was Folsom and Fifth. This is an extra adjunct building right down from the Chronicle, which was at Fifth and Mission. Yeah, and so we're down there. The columnists were there, like Alan Temko, who was architecture, and Jerry Nachman, John Carroll worked at home, and Steve Rubenstein worked at the main plant. I loved all these words. Like you would go down to the paper, you would go down to the plant, or you would file. I love the word file. File this.
Stephen Satterfeld worked at NOPA before launching his print magazine, Whetstone.
So, yeah, we're on Divisadero right now, which for my time in San Francisco is basically ground zero. I lived in this neighborhood and worked in this neighborhood for the majority of my time here. So from 2010 to 2015, before I moved to the East Bay, but 5 very full and active years within a 4-block radius of where we are, my home and my place of employment, NOPA Restaurant. So the story with NOPA and the community, I guess, is that NOPA is sort of on the verge of becoming an institutional restaurant in San Francisco for people who love eating and gathering. There have been many other restaurants that have opened since NOPA did, probably 12 or 13, or I don't even know how many years ago, but over a decade.
Yeah.
So they're definitely not like the newest restaurant in town anymore, but an enduring restaurant that still has managed to maintain high levels, high standards in service and in the execution of the food. And the part that I was most drawn to was just the community ethos, the vibe of the restaurant. And that was not really well known, my first visit there as a diner, but I had a really kind of more conventional experience there where I had dinner and I was like really moved by the scale of the restaurant. It's a huge place, and yet they had managed to, like I said, keep really high standards around the bar and the wine list and all the food that was coming out of the kitchen. So I went back the next week and was just kind of like, hey, this is a really impressive operation. Maybe you guys will hire me to like be a busboy here.
Did they do the whole table for one? And you're like, no. I'm just here to talk.
I came in during the day.
Okay.
Which is a pro move. I mean, people don't exactly apply for jobs in restaurants anymore. It's sort of a problem. But if you are going to apply for a job at a restaurant, you're certainly improving your chances if you do so during the day.
Right.
Once the doors are open, people get really cranky about folks who are coming in looking for employment. Once it's like a secret handshake,
Right.
You've just outed yourself like you don't know the secret handshake. So don't do that. But so I went during the day, and I ended up meeting the sommelier who I had met as a diner. Sent him my resume, and after looking over it, shared it with the owners of NOPA, and they said, we want to meet you for an interview. After interviewing with them, I learned a lot more about their kind of social mission, which is really centered on supporting local farms and our local food community here in the Bay Area. And I was strongly aligned with that mission. I had already had a pretty long career of working in restaurants in Portland and in Atlanta. And I...
So you were already kind of drawn to the place just from the dining experience.
Yeah, like
and then you learn more and you're like...
Totally, yeah. I had,
you guys.
I think a lot of people who work in restaurants, when we dine out, we notice everything, and it's actually really annoying for people who don't work in restaurants, because the people who do are like, oh my God, this little thing, that little thing.
Yeah.
But I was noticing stuff that instead of, with a critical eye, I guess in a more negative fashion, I had a critical eye towards like all the things that were going right there and just kind of how good everything was.
Right.
And so I thought that they might, the normal way of working in restaurants is that you kind of work your way up, you prove yourself, There's this whole like democratic hierarchy, and so I thought I was going to be a part of that, tried and true system, and I tried to go start off at the bottom, and they said, actually, we only want to hire you if you'll manage the restaurant. And I was like, no, I don't. I've already done that. It's really
You're like, I've got my own latex gloves and everything, guys. I'm ready.
No, it was like I had worked in restaurants long enough to know that it's a really hard job to manage, especially a restaurant on that scale.
Yeah. How many? How big is it?
Well,
in restaurant terms.
I mean, during the week, we were doing 500 diners a night, and on the weekend when we had brunch, that number could be closer to 800. And, it's 110 seats in the place. Like most restaurants in San Francisco would be like thrilled if more than 100 people walked in the door on a given night.
Lil Tuffy is a prolific poster artist.
Yeah, I kind of started bartending by accident when I was starting to do stuff at the Parkside. I was just kind of hanging out there one day, and it was super busy, and I just kind of got up and started helping. And
without being asked?
Yeah, kind of. Like, there's just, I started washing dishes and taking stuff and whatever, and they're like, okay, we'll pour this beer, make this drink, do that. I'm like, okay. And then, like, when it was over, like, yeah, you did an okay job. We had no idea, like, you knew how to bartend. I'm like, well, I don't. I've just been sitting here watching people for years. So, like, they gave me a chance, and I started bartending every once in a while and learning a little bit. And then when the ownership flip-flopped, I just became the manager all of a sudden and ended up
the bar manager?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, which happens every time this happens. But, so, yeah, I did that for a while, and then kind of burned out. Working like 6 days a week from open to close was a bit much. And then I took a step away, and then I injured myself and didn't really work for a while. And then once I finally was able to walk and carry stuff again, I took a Monday night shift to Pops, just basically to kind of get out of the house and start doing stuff again. And I worked there for a couple of years doing various things, and then one day I decided to fix a bunch of stuff, and the owners were like, oh, it's about time someone like stepped up, so you can run the place now. And that's kind of how that happened as well.
Kind of the same story almost.
Yeah.
You said you were there when the Giants clinched the World Series in 2010.
Yeah.
Which of course is, I would say, the only one that matters, but still to me the best. Do you want to talk about that night? Are you a Giants fan?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that night at the bar?
Yeah, it was pretty I mean, the whole, like, that whole end of the season and the playoffs was pretty crazy. And back then, 8 years ago, a lot of bars were still, like, anti-sports. They wouldn't show baseball games or basketball games. And because a couple of our other bartenders were huge Giants fans, we were already set up and equipped for that. And I brought in my big screen TV, so we had multiple TVs to watch on. We had someone DJing during the commercials, so we didn't have to listen to stupid ads. And
was the bar just, because where I was loud enough that we didn't have to hear Joe Buck's voice?
Yeah. That was the other thing. Like, we were trying to figure out how we could get rid of Joe Buck as much as possible. But it was also because no one else was really playing sports. Like, we were packed. So, I think it was like Pops, J&B, the 500. Like, those were like the few bars where you could watch playoffs and the World Series that season. And then, like, over the next couple of years, I watched all these bars suddenly, like, oh, we'll have the Giants on, we'll have the playoffs on, and, like, putting up projectors and stuff.
I was going to say, going back to what you said about, at least in 2010, bars being reluctant, I wonder what happened between, all the championships of all the teams around here. It's been a crazy run. But anyway.
Yeah, it's weird. I mean, I guess because, like, I don't know, the Niners and, like, the Super Bowl is always big at bars, but every Sunday it doesn't really seem to matter. But for some reason, that baseball thing really became a thing. And I think that's also carried over to the Warriors as well. I know, like, I wasn't the biggest basketball fan, and I used to be super annoyed when someone would come in and, like, oh, can you put the basketball game on? I'm like, oh, the Warriors are playing tonight? And they're like, oh, no, like, I don't know, Milwaukee or something. I'm like, no, we're not going to watch some like out of market game right now. Like, I want to watch Point Break. So,
could we go back to the night of Game 5?
I remember we had to close after the game because it was just insane. And 24th and York and the Mission, it's kind of like police aren't going to be coming anytime soon. Like, I remember like fireworks going underneath cars and people firing guns into the air, and then two of my friends, one of them got punched and one of them tripped, but they both broke their nose and broke a tooth. And like their reactions were just polar opposites of each other. Like, one of them's cheery and happy and laughing about it, and the other one's just having a complete meltdown, and screaming how she needs to get an ambulance, go to the hospital. I'm like, it's 2 blocks away. Like, you could walk. But it was a interesting night. And then just having to close the bar because it was just so rowdy outside and so many people, and one of the few nights of the year that we actually close.
What did you do after the bar closed?
Then I made my way to Mission Street, and I think I left my bike at the bar, and I remember just walking around, and by that point, buses are being turned over and garbage cans are being lit on fire in the middle of the street. And at the time I lived right by the Beauty Bar, and I remember being at that intersection and people firing guns off, and I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to duck inside somewhere. And I think almost all 3 World Series I ended up at the Lexington to finish celebrating. I got stuck in Beauty Bar the last time because they wouldn't let anyone out for a while until they cleared the intersection. And then I think that night at the Lexington, I had to show them my ID to show them that I lived right there. And like, I'm your neighbor. Like, I just want to, I'm not going to break anything.
Ava Lynch is a drummer and vocalist. She's currently in 2 bands, Preschool and The Gonks.
Yeah, I went to preschool in Chinatown, so that was like the complete opposite from where I was, and that was super funny. It was like kind of like the sketchiest preschool because it was like in the heart of Chinatown, and like just like people definitely didn't have their credentials, and but it was like it was fun, like growing up and like seeing Chinatown.
Do you still have I know that your mom grew up.
Yeah, my mom was born in Hong Kong, and then when she was 3, moved out here, so like the 70s. And my grandmother still lives in the same apartment, paying her $600 rent for her like giant, apartment, like that she clearly doesn't keep up with, but.
Yeah. If you can't be if you're paying $600, you can't be bothered to keep your place up.
I can only. Yeah. I tell people that, and they're just like, "Are you joking?" Like, what?
Well, she's been there. I'm guessing since what?
70, literally 70. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And she's still there now.
Yeah, she is.
Do you have other family in Chinatown? Or?
Nope, she's the only one.
Mm-hmm.
I guess my mother's uncle, I don't know what he would be associated with me. He owned a jewelry store.
Great uncle.
Yeah. So my great uncle owned a jewelry store in Chinatown as well. So we had that. Yeah.
Do you remember going there as a kid? Or?
Yeah, I did. Just a lot of jade. I remember trying on jade, and like, he always had a distinct smell to him, that sort of thing.
So growing up in Visitation Valley, you said you went to preschool in
Chinatown? Yeah.
But did Chinatown, what did you think? As a super young kid, what did you think?
Just constantly like being immersed in just like all of the shops there and like the culture. I could fluently, like I could understand Cantonese back then, and I wasn't fluent in to speak it, but I understood it completely because it was just surrounded by it the entire time. And looking at all the shops, we would walk down to this playground where like homeless people would hang out, but like the walk there, we would look at all the shops and just being like in awe, just complete awe. And I think like sometimes I feel like people forget to like literally look up from Chinatown because of like the buildings they're amazing. The architecture there is insane. So that's like when I bring my friends out that aren't from town, I'm like, remember to like look up too, and
And I mean, even the street lights in Chinatown are amazing.
The little lanterns and everything. Yeah.
Cool. So, so you went to preschool there. Where did you go to, I guess, elementary school?
Yeah, so I went to St. Anne's, which is a Catholic school, I believe on Funston, where that Andronicos is. You know that big pink build, like it's like a giant. It's that school, and that's where I learned discipline for like the first time. Like totally, like I had to wear the uniform every day, itchy wool sweater. You know, mean. I mean, not mean, but you know, just like one way of looking at things kind of mentality.
Strict.
Yeah, in other words, strict as hell. But I learned there to like what I definitely did not like and what I did like, and that was easy for me to decide. Just going to like a really strict school. Yeah.
Did you after that? Did you go to public school, or did you ever go to public
school? I actually never went to public school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So after St. Anne's,
I went to Waldorf.
Straight to Waldorf.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so you must have been.
It was ecstatic. You know, just like I got to wear what I want. I got to finally dye my hair. Like, just talk to people that like, you know, were interested in what I had to say. You know, and I felt like I was shut down a lot at that old school, which, you know, it made me want to rebel in a way, but I don't know, I had such like a good family, a good upbringing. I didn't feel the need to rebel at all because I had a good situation.
So what grade were you in when you switched over to Waldorf?
So I graduated 8th grade from that Catholic school and then started high school.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
At Waldorf. Yeah.
And so once you got to Waldorf, you said stuff like, you know, you dyed your hair. Like, what other kind of changes happened?
Let's see. I feel my drumming, I just finally got to become confident, which I didn't really know that I could do back then. Like any sort of confidence I did have was like so minute, and like I didn't want to like express any sort of like rebellious energy I had because I was too afraid to, and I didn't need to. I didn't feel the need to. But other than that,
but you did already play drums?
Yeah, for a little bit, but I feel like when I started high school, I finally got to like push myself to where I was too afraid to like push myself at all back when I was in like elementary school, you know, afraid of what people would have to say and stuff. But once I got to high school and found people that like the same music as me and stuff, it made me feel more passionate about like music in general and being surrounded by people that I want to be surrounded with, you know, and not taking in others' opinions as much as I did before, you know.